A vaccine that is being developed in a collaboration between the Canadian government and the Chinese company CanSino Biologics is making a key jump. It's skipping a final phase of testing in China, skipping phase 3, and is now approved for use by a research unit in the Chinese military for a period of 1 year. Now, we've been tracking this story for a while now, following work on the CanSino vaccine in this country. It's actually based on a cell line from the National Research Council. Lots of federal government investment in this. Dalhousie is supervising what are approvals for human trials in Canada, ultimately. But that's our starting point for this morning's conversation. Dr. Isaac Bogoch is back with me, as he so often is, infectious disease specialist at Toronto General Hospital. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Lovely to see you. And why don't we start with that? This approval, as I said, for a year use within the Chinese military of this vaccine, even though it's jumped right over the phase which looks at the efficacy and the safety of a vaccine candidate. What's the significance of this?
On the one hand, I think this is really the first, semi-wide scale implementation of a vaccine for COVID-19 in real world settings. On the other hand, as you point out, they're just skipping the phase 3 clinical trials, jumping right into giving this to the military in China. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this. I think in an ideal world, this would actually have gone through the phase 3 clinical trials. We'd have some data to determine if it truly works at individuals and in populations, and we'd have a lot more data on the safety of this with a much larger cohort of individuals. But I know. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
Here we go. And then coming back to this, because as I said, we've been talking about this, the Canadian involvement in this with the investment and the supervising with Dalhousie and the vaccine with the origins, I guess, to an NRC cell line here. I mean, that would, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're never going to jump to a phase, just jump right over phase 3 in Canada. But it is approved for human trials here, which Dalhousie would supervise. So what would be the implications of this then for us?
It's hard to know. I mean, I really, really hope they're collecting detailed data in the use in the Chinese military. We don't have a lot of the details as to what exactly they're doing. We don't know if this is a voluntary thing that they're doing, or if everyone in the military or certain people in the military are getting this one way or another. It's just not clear what the details are. Certainly, we wouldn't do something like that here. We wouldn't be allowed to do something like that here. We'd have to conduct phase 3 clinical trials before we start to provide a vaccine to the general public. And in all fairness, I'd love to see the data, the efficacy data from a large number of people, either in the late phase 2 clinical trials or from phase 3 trials before starting to give this out on a wide scale. So it's different, certainly a different approach. And I'm trying to think, I'm sure it's happened before, but I can't think just off the top of my head of when something jumped from a phase 2 data, skipping phase 3 and just entering implementation. So I got to think about that a little bit more, but I'm curious to see what happens.
For Canada, authorized to conduct phase 1 trials here, and then if it goes well, if it's successful, then on into phases 2 and 3. But it'll be interesting today, now that we're hearing about this story from China, whether there's federal medical officer response, maybe even from Dalhousie as well. We'll try to bring that forward today here on CBC News Network. Something else that we're just hearing about today, Dr. Bogoch, is at 9 o'clock, so just over an hour's time. We're going to get a number of municipalities holding news conferences to make some announcement on mask use. It sounds like it's going to be mandatory masks for public spaces and inside stores to have a little bit more of a unified, coordinated approach. Right now, it's dependent on where you live. It's very patchwork. Do you think the province isn't going as far as making the whole province under the same rules? What effect do you think this could have?
Well, certainly I'm glad that the province isn't going to mandate masking all across the province at this point in time. I think it's very clear that we have to timestamp all of our conversations. And just like the province was able to reopen in a regional manner, and much like other provinces, Alberta and Quebec, were able to reopen in a regional manner, I think masking policy, while I appreciate that people have been upset with some of the messaging and there's some confusion, I think masking policy would also benefit from a regional approach for several reasons. And if they're going to mandate masking, I think it wouldn't be ideal to do this in areas that have, 0 to very few infections at this point in time. And, it sounds like the pendulum is swinging in the direction where they are likely going to mandate this. And if they do, again, I really hope it's regional rather than a sweeping mandate across the province, or in some people are even calling for it across the country. It just doesn't really make sense to me to do that. But if it's going to be regional, if they're going to mandate it, regional is going to be the way to go.
More responsive on the ground. Ottawa looks like it's following suit by the end of this week. Windsor, Kingston already. And again, the Greater Toronto Area mayors look to be announcing something later on this morning. We are getting from a scientific journal, Dr. Bogoch, publishing this morning some research from Chinese scientists who have identified a new strain of influenza. And it's one which they say has the potential to become a pandemic. It's carried by pigs. It can infect humans. So this is not coronavirus. This is influenza. Don't be confused. We're already in the midst of one pandemic, and we're looking at the possibility of another. But is this, am I right in this? Scientists have been watching for a new bad strain of influenza for some time.
Absolutely. And certainly this is a big area of research and surveillance, looking for new strains of influenza that could break out and cause another pandemic. Of course, the last time we had that was in 2008, 2009 with H1N1. This is a different version, a little tweak in the H1N1. It's called the G4 H1N1. And based on what we know, this has been around since about 2011. They studied this from 2011 to 2018. It's been on pig farms. It certainly has infected some humans. The questions we have now, or the questions that the scientists studying it have, are, to what degree can this be transmitted efficiently from human to human? And what is the severity of this infection in humans? And it certainly has the hallmarks of having something that has a pandemic potential, just because no one would really be immune to it. The vaccine that we have currently wouldn't cover it. But I should point out that the vaccine that we have is modified to cover different strains of influenza, and that it could easily be modified to cover this strain and mass produced. So there's certainly, it wouldn't be like we'd be starting from scratch. The other thing too is this is just a reminder that there's a lot of infections, some that we know of, probably more that we don't know of, that have pandemic potential. We are always at risk for this, and it's important to have early detection systems in place such that we can find these and respond to these issues early on, so that we avoid the setting that we're in right now.
That's why the WHO says it's a reminder that we can't let down our guard. But it is discouraging all the time, all the same, I have to say, of another one potentially in the offing. Listen, particularly because on this day, 6 months ago, Dr. Bogoch, the WHO first warned us of this mysterious new illness that we now know to be COVID-19. And I would say one of the positives of these last 6 months is we've gotten to know you, and we've relied on your very calm and cool and excellent information. And I appreciate it so much every morning. Thank you very much.
Kind. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, you'll be on with our special Canada Day tomorrow as well, so we'll look forward to your taking part in all of that, Dr. Isaac Bogoch.